Welcome everyone to CoasterGuy23 review number 2. This is the second video of my new review series where I'll be reviewing a bunch of my credits under the same exact format. Today's review will be on a relatively new but massively popular roller coaster that is located at one of the most prospering parks in the world right now. It also happens to be themed to a rather popular movie series. And of course, I am talking about Jurassic World VelociCoaster at Universal's Islands of Adventure. This is a new for 2021 roller coaster and is currently in its 5th operating season. It is located at Universal Orlando Resort's Islands of Adventure. It's manufactured by Intamin, using their Intamin Modern Spline and the Intamin New Gen trains. VelociCoaster's track technically features Intamin's both double spline and single spline designs. Intamin's New Gen trains have been around for about 5 to 6 years now, and their key design features include 2 across seating and a lap bar that comes from over your shoulders and sits on your lap. These restraints are great at providing a feeling of comfort and openness. Intamin features these trains on almost all of their new thrill installations, including Pantheon, Conda, Two Tatis, and more. This train track combo is one of the best in the industry and provides a glass-smooth experience and handles all types of forces comfortably. VelociCoaster does not have a specialty. To get the counting stats out of the way, VelociCoaster has a height of 155 feet, which occurs on the top hat, a speed of 70 miles an hour, which occurs on the second launch, and a track length of 4,700 feet. The track length and top speed combination results in a sufficiently long ride experience. 105 feet is not particularly tall, but the top hat does feel bigger and more upscale when you stand directly next to it. Now, let's jump into the element profile. VelociCoaster features 19 total elements, including 8 airtime moments, 4 inversions, and 8 maneuvers. You may notice that 8, 4, and 8 does not add up to be 19. This is because VelociCoaster has a rare double element. This happens when the force chart cannot distinguish 2 separate elements, but there are definitely 2 unique forces present. The element that this occurs on for VelociCoaster is the dive loop, and we'll discuss more about that when we break the dive loop down in the POV. VelociCoaster's 8 airtime moments include the dive loop, the pop over the rock structure, the top hat, the wave turn, twist and shout, speed hill, and the final 2 bunny hills before the brakes. Its 4 inversions include an Immelman, a dive loop, a 0G stall, and a heartline roll that is so good that it has its own special name, the Mosasaurus roll. More on the Mosasaurus roll later during the POV. Its 8 maneuvers include both launches, 3 over bank turns, a shimmy, a right-handed corner, and an outer bank bunny. In case you're wondering why an outer bank bunny is a maneuver in this case, I'll let you have your guesses, but I'll go over the full reason why when we watch the POV. Overall, VelociCoaster has a really nice mix of elements. It's unique from other coasters in that it's really heavy on maneuvers, and that is somewhat of a risk, as maneuvers are not commonly thought of as being the main focus of a ride. Whether that was intentional or not, I'm not sure, but it definitely makes this ride unique. Already, my number one critique of this coaster is that when you have a layout this long, you're putting a lot of pressure on those 8 airtime moments to be very memorable, as they are a lot fewer and far between amongst the sea of other elements. Now, these 8 airtime moments really deliver, all is forgiven, but I guess you'll have to keep watching this review to wait and see if that's the case. This force chart coming up here of the ride will give us our first indication if that is truly the case. Overall though, VelociCoaster's element profile really highlights one of its main strengths, variety of elements. Now looking at the force chart, as always you can go back to the previous screen to figure out where exactly each element is located. Some things that quickly stick out to me is the second launch there that happens right in the middle at around 35 seconds. Towards the end at around 62 seconds, you can see the insanity that is the Mosasaurus roll. And overall, we can see the airtime moments that VelociCoaster does have. We can tell from this force chart that strength is already going to be a little bit of a concern. Full transparency though, this file was recorded in row 6, which is more towards the middle of VelociCoaster's train. This has a noticeable negative effect on one of VelociCoaster's elements, and we will talk about that when it comes up in the POV. One last thing about this force chart, you can see that the pull into the top hat after the second launch provides a good moment of intensity and is VelociCoaster's most intense moment, at least from a peak positive G perspective. Alright, that's enough of the force chart, let's jump into the POV. Starting off, we have launch number 1. This launch does have a really nice pre-show to it, as the raptors are to the left and right of you, and as they break out of their cages and run into the cage, you, on the train, follow right after them. This is an LSM launch, and for LSM launches that I've experienced, I would consider this one a little bit above average. Like most LSM launches, it starts off with a slow roll, but as you exit the main building and towards the first element, an Immelman, you can really start to feel the acceleration as you start picking up speed. Compared to an LSM like what they have on Copperhead Strike, this by far and away exceeds that in terms of acceleration and intensity. However, it is still nowhere close to something like a hydraulic launch or compressed air. After the first initial roll, the acceleration feels pretty constant. This feels like your stereotypical run-of-the-mill LSM launch to me. maybe a little bit better. Next comes the Immelman, and I really do love the shaping of this Immelman. It's a little bit deformed, but in a really good way in my opinion. Normally, an Immelman consists of a half loop followed by a half corkscrew. In this case though, the loop that makes up the first half of the Immelman is on an incline. This leaves a really unique sensation at the top of the Immelman where you are not quite all the way inverted, but you're pretty close, and then it makes for a really smooth transition out of it and into the next element. This Immelman is pretty intense too, as the train is coming off that first launch with a ton of speed, and it already has to make a 180-degree pitch change to get to the top of that Immelman. The crazy part is, this is actually my least favorite inversion on VelociCoaster, which is not at all a dig at this Immelman, but rather a testament to how good the inversions are on VelociCoaster. Coming up next, we have element number 3, which is a dive loop, and this, ladies and gentlemen, is our rare double element, where it doubles as both inversion and airtime. Clearly this is an inversion as the train reaches the desired roll angle to be considered an inversion. However, you can clearly see on entry that the first bit of this dive loop is shaped like an airtime hill. And you can definitely feel that little bit of ejector that you get before the train rolls under itself and into the inversion. This cannot be seen on a traditional force chart, thus I have no choice but to declare this a double element. This double element though does make it hard to give this element an airtime score, because this element does definitely have a ejector and hang time component, and both show up as -1G on the airtime chart. Rather than try to pick apart the chart of the specific element, I decided to just give this element the benefit of the doubt and call all the time spent under 0G airtime. This results in an airtime score for the dive loop of 21.29. As for the rest of the element, it took me a couple rides to realize how much this dive loop actually twists you to the left. Rather than just a 180-degree turn back the way you came, this is more of a 270-degree turn where it has to get you in line with the overbank turn. This definitely adds some extra intensity and whip to the dive loop that otherwise would not have been there. And for that reason, this is my second favorite inversion on VelociCoaster. Moving on to element number 4, we have the first of 3 overbanks. Not going to spend too much time on this one. You go through it so quickly that you kind of barely even realize what it is. But it does have some nice steepness to the banking, and it is a little bit forceful. The speed is good, but it's just not very memorable. This overbank leads you into element number 5, which is an ejector pop over the rock structure. This thing really catches you off guard, as you are still transitioning out of the overbank and there's barely any valley between this element and the previous. Then, out of nowhere, you get a nice -0.7G pop of ejector air. It is definitely not very sustained though, and all the heavy lifting is done by just the sheer value of negative force that you feel. This results in an airtime score of 16.76. Definitely in the pop range, but still nothing to sneeze at. Next is element number 6, which is this shimmy right here, traveling through the first 2 raptor statues. For me, this is where the raptor cage section really starts to lose its intensity and punchiness that it had up to this point. You still are traveling at a really good pace, but for me, this element just doesn't really do anything. There's no snap or whip, there's no high banking, there's no airtime, it's just meandery. Now, I know they're probably trying to highlight the theming with the raptor statues, but if that's the case, I really wish they would have done more with the theming if it meant creating a complete filler element. Even if they had done that though, I still probably would have complained about this element because it's such a quick decline in layout compared to the elements that came before. Like I said, pacing is still really good. This maneuver though is just not good. Next we travel into the second of the 3 overbanks, and this feels pretty much exactly like the first overbank except to the left and not taken as fast. You get that steep banking feeling, but again, this element just doesn't do much besides get you from point A to point B. It pales in comparison to elements earlier in the raptor cage section. Next, we have our third straight maneuver, this right-handed corner. Compared to the previous 2, this one is definitely snappier and more purposeful. The raptor interactions on this element are definitely better than the ones that were on the shimmy. If I had to pick one of these maneuvers in the back half of the raptor cage section to stick out, this one would definitely be it. Element 9 is this outer banked bunny that leads into the second launch. Normally, this would be an airtime moment, but I regret to report that there is not any. On my rides, I definitely knew that if there was any airtime, it was definitely on the very weak end. I didn't believe it at first when I was analyzing the file, but I cross-compared my file to other files in RideForce's DB, and all of them report 0 airtime on this moment. Thus, this is basically just like the shimmy in that there is a small banking change, but other than that, this element really doesn't accomplish anything, other than get you in line with the second launch. For those keeping track at home, that's 4 straight maneuvers lasting nearly 14 seconds of ride time, and while the right-hand corner is definitely the best, none of them are particularly memorable. This is a big reason why density is important to me, as sections like this on a ride can really hurt its density score, despite maintaining a good pace. Element 10 is launch number 2. This is where VelociCoaster resets itself in preparation for its second half. This LSM launch is one of the better ones that I have experienced, whereas the first one feels a little bit more average. Smooth, constant acceleration, and for LSMs, surprisingly pretty high acceleration. Throughout my years of riding roller coasters, I found that LSMs almost always perform better from a rolling start rather than a dead stop. And that's exactly the case here, as the second launch doesn't really have that initial lull the first launch has as it tries to get you started from a dead stop. We now approach element number 11, which is one of VelociCoaster's very best, its signature top hat. As I mentioned previously, the pull up into this top hat is pretty intense and is definitely the most forceful moment on VelociCoaster. Then, as you go over the top hat, you get VelociCoaster's one and only sustained ejector moment, and it's a good one, especially in the back as you get pulled down the drop. Now, for my file, this received an airtime score of 29.75, but that felt unjust. Top hats in general are super variable to row changes, so I feel it's fair to share the scores from some files other RideForce DB users recorded. In row 8, this recorded a 41.25, and in row 12, this recorded a whopping 66.94. That score would put it among the elite sustained ejector moments. However, even that score would put it on the weaker end of Intamin top hats, as the drop just isn't quite as steep as some of the other ones. This top hat fills both the role of having a tall drop and a sustained ejector moment on VelociCoaster, and it desperately needs both of those things in order to feel like a complete ride. Now we cut through the jungle into element number 12, which is a 0G stall. The entrance and exit into this element is a great mix of snap and fluidity. As for the stall itself, Intamin and RMC stalls are definitely distinguishable. Go over some RMC stalls in future videos on this channel, but as for this one, it's very low to the ground and more drawn out. The upside down part itself also doesn't really have much curvature, leading to a very flat and hang time based experience. I would say that's the main distinguishing factor between RMC and Intamin 0G stalls. Intamins are definitely longer, but flatter and less 0G based and more focused on hang time. Both are great though, and for this one specifically, I just love how long it holds you upside down and that it goes over the pathway. Element 13 is this wave turn. As is characteristic of wave turns, as you get up on the banking of this turn, you can see the track curve out and in, giving you a nice pop of airtime while you're turning. This is a third straight excellent element on VelociCoaster, with this one being another airtime moment, with a score of 10.17. A score that low, this is definitely an ejector pop, and they could have increased this number by increasing the extremity of the curve, but that's just kind of grasping at straws. Gliding over the water, we enter element 14, which is a twist and shout. A twist and shout is basically an overbanked turn, but at the very peak of it, you quickly flip outwardly banked and back in. These have become pretty popular over recent years, as they have some good ejector in between two snappy transitions, which makes them super unique. The outwardly banked portion of this one doesn't last very long, but these elements are so strong that it still generates a moderate moment of ejector with an airtime score of 25.24. As I've mentioned, outwardly banked moments score really well on airtime score because you get the momentum of both going downward and turning right during this airtime moment. Following that awesome sequence of elements, we enter element number 15, which is the third overbank. Of the four elements that make up this little mini loop, this is definitely the weakest, as it's just another overbank, although shaped a little bit differently than the first two, but other than the high banking feeling, it just is kind of meant to get you from point A to point B. They definitely could have replaced this with a different element that would have resulted in airtime or a more snappy maneuver, but instead, we got this. Unlike the Raptor Cage section though, we can kind of forget about this maneuver, as element 16 that immediately follows is the speed hill. It's so shallow that it doesn't really give much air with a score of only 4.38, but it's still a welcome element for me and it provides a nice little airtime boost before undoubtedly VelociCoaster's signature element, which is element 17, the Mosasaurus roll. Cutting right to the chase, this is the best roller coaster inversion that I have ever experienced. It's basically just a heartline roll that is not perfectly in line that takes place over the water. However, it is taken so quickly and so snappy that it literally feels like it is going to throw you into the water below you. The beginning of the roll especially, it just feels like the train is just forcing you to come along with it, especially after that little airtime hill that came right before. The POV doesn't really do this thing justice. You kind of just got to go out and ride it to experience the unique forces, especially at the beginning of the roll when it just absolutely snaps you through it. Off the ride it looks graceful, but on the ride it is intense, fun, snappy, and just amazing. The final two elements are these two little bunny hills right here before the brakes. They're fun little moments. They don't offer much in terms of airtime, scoring 3.34 and 5.09. Given how they had to get up to the elevation of the brake run, I think they did pretty good here in terms of making the elements interesting and memorable. As we hit the brakes here, that will conclude our POV breakdown for Jurassic World VelociCoaster. Taking a look at the airtime profile here, I would say that 8 moments is a satisfactory amount. It's definitely more than what most roller coasters have, but there were definitely opportunities in the layout where they could have included a couple additional moments. 7.6 seconds of airtime is also not an incredibly above average number. Taking a look at the moments, as I said, the top hat I feel my score is a little bit unfair, and we've seen that it can go up as high as 66, so that serves as VelociCoaster's go-to sustained ejector moment and is by far the best airtime moment on VelociCoaster. Your other strong airtime moments are going to be the dive loop, the twist and shout, and the pop, and those provide a reasonably good amount of air. Then you have your wave turn, which is just a nice little ejector pop. Then you have your speed hill and bunnies, and those really don't do much of anything. The top hat definitely is the carrying feature of this airtime profile. But in terms of all the other elements, I feel like there could have been a couple more airtime moments, and the moments that it did have could have been stronger. Now jumping into the full ride summary, we'll start to the right on our low priority stuff. Starting off with laterals, for me the main lateral moments on VelociCoaster are the Mosasaurus roll, where it pulls you from right to left, and the right-handed corner inside the raptor cage section. And I guess there's also a little bit on the dive loop. So 2 good moments of laterals and 1 okay one. I'm scoring this right at about average. Moving on to some of VelociCoaster's biggest strengths, we have presentation. As far as thrill coasters go, VelociCoaster has the singular best queue line. From the statue in the first section, to the raptor animatronics, to the train flyby on the second launch, it is just beautiful. It really does feel like they ripped it right out of Jurassic World, as it is a perfect mix of dinosaurs and modern tech, and Universal did a really good job in conveying that in this queue line. Operationally, this thing normally runs with 4 trains, although when I went in August of 2024, there was a couple hours where it ran with only 2, and if that's the case, I do not recommend waiting in that line. But 80% of the time I was there, it was on 4 trains, and the line moves very quickly. VelociCoaster also has an entire room dedicated to just double-sided lockers, and the system it employs is very awesome and easy to use. Also, the ride just looks amazing, from the towering top hat over the water to the vegetation, the stuff inside the raptor cage section and rock formations. There's nothing I can really complain about here. Presentation gets a perfect score because of course it does. This kind of goes hand in hand with VelociCoaster's theming, which is also excellent. It can be really hard to tell a story behind a thrill coaster, but VelociCoaster manages to do that, and it's a pretty simple premise of that you are on a roller coaster that is literally built inside the raptor cage. The explanation of this theme is given by Bryce Dallas Howard in the final part of the queue on this awesome video board. I rode VelociCoaster 11 times, so I can pretty much recite this whole video from memory. Universal is just geniuses for putting together this video and putting it on for people who don't have their phones in line. The first half of the ride really fits the theme as you rip around the raptor cage, but the second half of the ride doesn't really have a ton, but it just really looks nice, and the front half is so strong that it really doesn't need it. As you can see, I graded theming nearly perfect. I only docked it just a smidge because, hey, Universal, put a Mosasaurus animatronic or statue next to the Mosasaurus roll in the water. That would just be absolutely sick. You can thank me later for the idea. But yeah, theming, basically perfect. Moving on to the next priority group, we have trains. As I stated, I'm a huge fan of these Intamin new gen trains. They're comfortable, they're open, they're easy to operate, they run super smooth. I do know there is one train that I prefer over these, so I'll give these a nearly perfect score, but not quite. Next up, we have propulsion. The second launch on VelociCoaster is definitely better than the first. In terms of launches I've experienced, I put VelociCoaster's first launch right in the middle, and then the second launch is a little bit above average. Having a launch at all gets you an average propulsion score for me, so for VelociCoaster, I'm going to put it right about in the middle of max score and average. The launches definitely contribute to the overall pace and feel of this ride. Next up we have positives, and there are a couple forceful moments on VelociCoaster, none of which are super sustained though, I would say. Namely, the first couple elements of the raptor cage section, the pull in and pull out of the top hat, and in general, its valleys are more forceful than your average coaster, so I'm going to give VelociCoaster above average for positives. Moving into the next priority group, we have inversions. VelociCoaster does only have 4, but these 4 are just absolutely elite. The Mosasaurus roll being one of the best inversions in the world, and it's so good that it can make you forget about how good the other 3 inversions are on this ride. I'm giving it an almost perfect score, but not quite, because just like airtime moments, I just feel they could have replaced one of the maneuvers with a 5th inversion, and if that 5th inversion was as good as the other ones, you're probably looking at the best 5 inversion sequence on any roller coaster on the planet. Moving on to variety, VelociCoaster excels in variety, featuring nearly an equal amount of airtime, inversions, and maneuvers, including a rare double element. Definitely prefer the variety mix in the second half, as it's a little bit more airtime focused than the more maneuvery inversion focus in the front half, but I digress. The difference in variety between the 2 sections actually helps its variety score even more, so how about that? But just because it has 3 overbanks and the maneuvers can be a little repetitive, I'm scoring it a little bit less than perfect. Up next we have maneuvers, and while VelociCoaster has a lot of them, I can't really point to one and say, dang, that maneuver was excellent. The overbanks have some good steepness to them, but they are taken so quickly that you really don't feel anything on them. The shimmy and outer bank turn in the raptor cage are kind of just nothing elements. And the right-handed corner is definitely the most memorable of the bunch. So while I can appreciate the amount of maneuvers VelociCoaster tries to pull off, it could have done a better job executing them. So for maneuvers, I'm going to give VelociCoaster a little bit above average. Moving on to smoothness, VelociCoaster is glass smooth with the Intamin new gen trains and Intamin modern track. All of these that I've ridden are glass smooth with literally not an ounce of roughness. It doesn't really get better than that, so I'm going perfect score on smoothness. Up next we have pacing, and VelociCoaster's pacing is excellent. All you have to do to see that is just feel how fast the ride is going before the brakes and the second launch. It just holds its speed very well, even in the Raptor Cage section and on the bunny hops before the final brake run. I'm docking it a little bit just for that Raptor Cage section that I talked about earlier, although even that is still pretty well paced. So pacing, near perfect, but with one very small flaw. Now we move on to density, and this is where some of the elements toward the end of the Raptor Cage section are really going to hurt this ride in my opinion. I wouldn't go as far as call it a dead zone, but the 14 seconds before the second launch really just are uneventful and don't really do much to your body in terms of forces. I get the whole point is so that you can look at the Raptor statues, but even then, there was so much more you could have done with this section. Even just having one more airtime hop would have greatly helped it out in its airtime categories. The second half of the ride really prevents this section from doing too much damage to the ride overall, but for its density score, it definitely hurts it, and I'm giving VelociCoaster still a good bit above average, but definitely not exceptional. First up in the highest priority categories, we have duration. In my last review of Steel Vengeance, it had over 80 seconds of drop to brake ride time and 28 total elements, whereas VelociCoaster has 19 total elements and a 67-second drop to brake time. So while it does perform worse than Steel Vengeance in those categories, those are still some elite numbers. So for duration, I just settled VelociCoaster's slider a little bit to the left of where I had Steel Vengeance's. Up next we have airtime strength, and VelociCoaster really only has one moment of super sustained ejector. That being said, it is a good one in the top hat. Then it has 2 moments of moderate and a bunch of pops. And in general, its airtime score of 116.02 is pretty mediocre. But the top hat is so good that I'll still give VelociCoaster a bit above average in terms of airtime strength. Then finally, we have airtime quantity, and VelociCoaster has 8 airtime moments lasting 7.6 seconds. I would say this is a good bit above average, but I am going to dock it slightly for its last 3 airtime moments really not offering much. But still, you take 8 moments of airtime any day you can get it, and VelociCoaster for me definitely is better in airtime quantity than airtime strength. So for its airtime quantity score, I'm going to go with somewhere between elite and above average. Overall, VelociCoaster's biggest strengths are its elite theming for a thrill coaster, its variety, and its pace. This especially shows in the second half of the ride, as every element is unique and delivers well, concluding in one of the best inversions in the world, the Mosasaurus roll. However, I do think another airtime moment or two would have served this ride well, and the Raptor Cage section could have included more memorable elements, especially towards the end of it. If you emphasize a good theme and variety, I can easily see how this roller coaster ends up as number 1 on your list. In Captain Coaster, it's 99.8 percentile, ranking 4th out of 1,807 coasters in the database. For me, VelociCoaster currently comes in at number 6 out of my 220 credits with a percentile of 97.73%. While I certainly have my complaints about the layout, I can certainly recognize how many things VelociCoaster does well, even if they may be some of my lower priority items. Main negative factors for me just come down to the overall airtime experience and the ineffectiveness of certain elements in the Raptor Cage section. This concludes CoasterGuy23 review number 2 on VelociCoaster at Universal Islands of Adventure. If you don't want to have to wait for all my reviews to come out to view my current list of roller coasters, find me on CaptainCoaster.com, username CoasterGuy23. To view my coaster count, parks visited, ride stats, and a bunch of other stuff, friend me on LogRide, also at CoasterGuy23. To view or download any of my RideForce files, visit my profile on RideForce's DB, also at CoasterGuy23. Thank you guys all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.